Hi, this is Andrea. I am the mother to a beautiful autistic daughter, and I believe in a better future for her and all other neurodivergent young people. So I hope this is not your first time listening, but if it is, I'm also one of the many parent advocates for neurodiversity in Oxfordshire, UK. Being an advocate allows me to use my voice for my daughter, for other parents, for neurodivergent individuals themselves, and for professionals. Welcome to Season 2 of the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. Today, in the Neurodiverse Voices podcast, I have two superstar guests. I have Jiedi, who is a clinical psychologist, and Emma, who is a research assistant, and they both work for the University of Oxford. They have this wonderful study that's very much needed ongoing on Autism Character Strengths. And I am, besides being very grateful to them for running such a great study, I'm also very grateful that they are my guests today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Right, so can you start by introducing yourselves a little bit and giving me a background on your research academic journey?
Yeah, sure. I can kick us off. Well, thank you for having us, Andrea. So I'm Jiedi. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been doing research in kind of work and working with autistic children and young people for quite some time. I think it's about 10 years ago when I started volunteering at a charity in London and started working with and supporting an autistic young boy. And really it was starting from there that I started thinking about what are some ways that we can support autistic children and young people and their families and improve their quality of life. So in the last 10 years, I've been doing lots of work around, supporting autistic young people right from kind of school age and transitioning to university, and also thinking about different aspects of their life. So around kind of adapting mental health assessments and treatments to support autistic young people's well-being as well. So currently in our research now, we have more of a strength focus, really identifying, ways that we can support autistic young people to think about what their strengths might be and how to apply them in ways that are really helpful and useful to them, and also supporting key stakeholders. So that's their parents and carers, but also teachers and clinicians to support young people to identify their strengths and be able to work in a more strength-based way as well.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. Yeah, and that's fantastic because if you heard one of my previous episodes, we tend to focus on what's negative. So it's really impressive to see this work being done. And I think I can speak on behalf of other autism moms and dads who will be very grateful to see where we go with that. Thank you. Emma.
So my name's Emma. I'm a research assistant supporting Jiedi in her fellowship. I am sort of relatively new to the research world. But yeah, I guess before sort of jumping into sort of my academic journey, I think it's important to say that sort of my personal interest in neurodiversity came from sort of quite a young age, with having a younger brother with an intellectual disability and sort of various other special needs. As a young carer, essentially sort of experienced firsthand the systemic impact of having a sibling with an intellectual disability, received sibling support through a disability organisation called Be Able, which is based in North Yorkshire, and later became a volunteer. And I think it was there where I sort of really discovered my passion for psychology and neurodiversity, and went on to study a bachelor's degree in psychology at Northumbria University, and then went on to study a master's degree at Durham University, and that was in developmental psychopathology. It was there, I think, that really sort of developed my research skills sort of even further. and from there sort of gained lots of different clinical experience in sort of different settings, so in private and sort of NHS, with a diverse range of service users, but I still sort of had that drive and sort of passion to work in the field of neurodiversity, and so I managed to sort of get an assistant psychologist role in an NNS Tier 4 CAM service, and that was working with children and young people that had a diagnosis of autism and or intellectual disability that were at risk of an inpatient admission. And I stayed there for quite a long time as an assistant psychologist, stayed there for 3 years. And it was then when this sort of role with Jiedi came up, which I was very excited about. I was ready to sort of dust off my research skills.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great because it was still sort of an area that I really love, but just sort of wearing a different hat, I guess. I guess that's where.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
That's great. Thank you for sharing your story. So we kind of touched base on this already, but can you explain what the Autism Character Strengths research project is more about, and maybe the main goals and the objectives of the research, just in a bit more detail for parents, teachers, and young people who might be listening, so that they know a bit more about and can participate and maybe get involved?
Yeah, sure. So I think it goes a little bit back to right when I started this body of work last year, and I was really interested in looking at, in research, but also in kind of routine practice, what are some ways that we define strength in autism? And actually, when we look at the research that's out there thinking about strength, it taps into lots of different types of strength that young people might have. Some of them might relate to particular skills, or lots of literature might look at things like, having a really detail-orientated, hyper-focused attention, or really great memory. And then other research might suggest that autistic young people might be really creative and, have musical talents or artistic talents, and talent certainly is a type of strength as well. But I guess what really got me thinking is, how can we find a framework that defines what strengths are in a way that it's accessible to everybody, so we kind of can identify something that's positive and can be viewed as a strength in every single young person that we support, because we know that for a lot of autistic young people, sometimes the more kind of stereotypical skills and strength may or may not be applicable to all the autistic young people out there. So that's when I kind of stumbled across the character strengths framework. And this is something that's borrowed from positive psychology, which really is kind of thinking about, instead of thinking about, our mental health difficulties and what's keeping those difficulties going, I guess in positive psychology, we're thinking about, what are the factors that allow somebody to thrive and really flourish and maintain their well-being. So that seemed really fitting, that character strength is a framework that came out from the positive psychology body of literature. And I guess character strength is really interesting. It was kind of developed with a very large team of very multidisciplinary researchers and academics across lots of fields. So not just in psychology, but philosophers, people who study kind of religion and spirituality. And the goal of the initial project was to find traits, or I guess these characteristics that make us all human, really. And, things that we really value as a human being across culture and time, that really allow us to flourish and develop a really positive sense of self. And so it was that component of thinking about, looking beyond psychology, but also looking at things across more of a pan-cultural perspective that really, caught my attention. And I really like the underpinning message of character strength, because it suggests that everybody has all 24 different types of character strength that taps into lots of areas. So you could be looking at somebody's wisdom, and you could be looking at somebody's bravery and courage, and spirituality. So it just seemed like a really nice, comprehensive framework that really allowed everybody to find something that they can identify and relate to within themselves. So when I started looking at character strength, I was really struck by how actually there's been very little that's been published in autism, especially supporting autistic children and young people through this character strength framework. And so that's how this project kind of all started, from thinking about, how do we identify strengths that every single autistic young person can relate to in some way. And so character strength seems to fit the bill. And now we're looking at how do we adapt the character strength framework and all the different ways that we can assess character strength to best support autistic young people and their families as well.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And in terms of the findings, I don't know if we are allowed yet to share anything, but would you be able to share some key findings and perhaps one of the common character strengths you have identified in autistic young people so far?
Yeah, so far it's been a really rewarding experience. We're conducting lots and lots of interviews with autistic young people, their parents and carers, but also teachers and clinicians to try to get different perspectives on what they view kind of strengths to be in autistic young people. And I think one thing that really struck us is there's so much individual differences actually. So everybody, I know that often the question is, what are some top character strengths that autistic young people might have? And actually what this research is showing us is we really celebrate those individual differences. And actually, some young people might have love and kindness and humor to come on top. Other young people might have things like creativity and curiosity. Fairness, again, is a really common one. Lots of young people share stories of, actually it's important for me to stick to the rules and actually be fair to everybody that I meet. And that in itself is a really, really big strength. So yeah, one thing that I took away from this is lots of individual differences. And it's been really refreshing to talk to different stakeholder groups as well about strength in different contexts. I don't know, Emma, what do you think?
I'd agree. I think, it's just been a really refreshing experience for me as well. And just sort of, just a positive experience for all the participants, it seems. And just turning things around and actually sort of looking at situations from a strengths perspective, which is just really refreshing and sort of just very thought-provoking for me as well, doing the interview.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
Yeah. And how would you say that these strengths differ or align with neurotypical individuals?
That's a really interesting question. So I guess the framework of character strength is, kind of applied to everybody. So in a way, we're looking at the same profile of 24 different character strengths. But what we're really interested in is how autistic young people might be able to apply this framework to themselves and really develop that sense of, these are the values that's most important to me, and how that might influence how they view themselves and build a more positive self-identity. So in a way, the character strengths are the same when you're looking at neurotypical young people or autistic or neurodivergent young people, but I guess it's the different combinations of strength that might come out to be really unique to that individual as well.
In terms of impacts, how can parents use the insights from your research, parents, teachers, and young people themselves? How would they be able to, and I'm quite interested to know this myself as a parent, to support our children, our autistic children?
Yeah. So I think one thing is often we always ask an open question at the start, and I know, Andrea, you talked about this in your last episode. So before parents and anybody come in to do that strength questionnaire with us, we ask an open question around, can you tell us a little bit about your young person's strength? And it's amazing to compare what people say right at the start versus what they say after kind of receiving their character strength report and reading 24 different types of strength about their young person. And I think that's one thing, because it really shows us that, even though people would like to think, I'm really strength focused, I want to work and support somebody's strength, we can only pay attention and notice what we know. And I think one beauty of this project is allowing lots of different people to actually see there's lots of things that perhaps even before doing the questionnaire, things like humility, that that might not even be in your sphere of consciousness to look out.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how, for some parents it's a case of, whereas before I might have thought, my young person was really shy and really socially anxious and didn't want to share their achievements with other people, and view that in quite an anxiety-based way. But actually, through reflecting how humility might be one of the young person's strengths, and that's actually celebrated, in somewhat. And it's okay to let your achievements speak for themselves without, really always shouting from the rooftops. And that's really helped parents to shift their perspectives a little bit and really think, actually, instead of just seeing, lots of things that they see in everyday life as a way of anxiety unfolding, is actually a way of that young person communicating something else, and actually can be perceived as, through a different lens of strength as well. And that's been really interesting with teachers and clinicians too, I think, to just open up their perspective to think about the language you use when you talk to that young person and their families, and things that you can start paying attention to in the work that you do with that young person to really, develop that awareness of different aspects of their strength. Don't know, Emma, you've been doing a lot of interviews with professionals. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think awareness is sort of like a massive thing, and sort of, both like parents and carers, teachers and clinicians sort of thinking like, okay, so in this situation, what strength could be drawn on? Are they sort of like overusing it or underusing it? Sort of which strength could sort of help them in this specific situation? And just, that's it. So just sort of thinking it through just with them. It's just been really, valuable, I think.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I think it's really nice because whereas in previous literature and in interviews, and also when talking to young people, sometimes they say, well, I don't want to call something a strength because I'm worried that people might not be aware that, sometimes the same behavior or the same skill that I'm referring to can really get me into quite tricky situations, and they might perceive that also as a weakness at other times. And the character strength framework is really interesting because it talks about these different strengths, I guess, as kind of almost characteristics of that young person. And it also talks about how sometimes you might, like Emma said, be overly using some strengths that come more naturally to you, and underusing or not using enough of other strengths that may not come so naturally to you. So again, it's allowing people to think, at times when you're really stuck, instead of feeling like, I don't think that's a strength of mine because I'm really, it can get me into really tricky situations. It's allowing you to see, for example, perseverance. Of course, that's a really excellent strength to have. It gets you through really difficult times. And at other times, if you're overusing perseverance and not paying enough attention to things like teamwork or fairness or things like that, you might be overlooking lots of other things, and that's what's getting you stuck in the moment.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
Yeah, it's about finding the right balance and
flexibility as well.
Yeah. And the other thing, in terms of the benefits that we had a brief chat about it this morning, is I think naturally the questionnaire ends up being some kind of therapy to us parents, because it forces you in a positive way, of course, without you realizing. You are kind of self-analyzing the way you look at children, and thinking about the clinicians where I have no experience whatsoever besides having my daughter's reports. The way I see it is it's all about what they cannot do. So at the end of the day, it's all about the weaknesses of the young person. So if this is going to it's proving already to help, even if it's just the use of language, it will definitely have a great impact on everyone's lives.
Yeah, certainly. And I think we're doing some internal training at the moment with clinicians that we support in Oxford. And a lot of the work is around helping clinicians support families and young people to complete questionnaires around their strength, but not just kind of you do a questionnaire, you never talk about it again, but really actively bringing in those conversations at every opportunity possible. So whether that's in kind of assessment feedback or treatment planning, and also throughout the treatment, to get young people thinking, what are some of your strengths that you can tap into to help you through treatment, because sometimes accessing mental health treatment can be a really difficult thing and difficult journey. And so I think if we can simultaneously allow young people to really reflect on what resources they have that they can tap into and build a more positive identity by the end of that treatment, then that's a really positive way of approaching it.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
Yeah, certainly. If you might not have anything, but I doubt that you don't. Have you encountered any challenges during your research and so far?
Emma and I probably will have different takes on this.
You go first.
Yeah, so I think one thing is always around, as a clinician and researcher, one thing I'm really keen on is how do we, it's very nice that you're doing a lovely research project, but how do you translate those and implement those into real life and make it part of routine practice in different settings? And certainly one question, I guess, not so much a challenge, but something that I've been thinking about is a lot of the character strength questionnaires that we're getting families to do are quite lengthy. And of course you think, they're 24 strength, and if you want to assess them all, there's going to be a fair amount of questions that you'd be answering. But certainly recognise the time pressure that services are under and teachers might be under as well. So one challenge, I guess, going down the line around disseminating our findings and implementing is how can we help young people and families tap into and identify those strengths in a much more time efficient way. So how do we perhaps condense some of the questions and really allow young people to get to their strengths much more quickly and develop that awareness? So that's one thing I'm thinking of in terms of the translational piece. I don't know, Emma, if you have other insights.
Yeah, I mean, no challenges as such, but yeah, no, I'd agree. Just from doing sort of the interviews, it's a very long questionnaire, and sort of, have bits and pieces of feedback from sort of clinicians and teachers, just to how long it actually is, and just, thinking about sort of whether that's actually feasible and practical sort of disseminating it in the future. I'm not too sure.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
Yeah, and also from the parents' perspective, I think this is one of my points in terms of feedback, that it was quite long. Happy to respond, if it helps, but I think we could shorten it down slightly, and it would be a lot easier for you as well. In terms of the future, what are the next steps for the Autism Character Strengths research?
Yeah, lots of really exciting things. So,
Exciting things.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So at the same time that we're doing our research, we really want to make sure we are involving different stakeholder groups at the same time and training, clinicians and teachers, but also supporting parents and carers through kind of workshops that we're delivering to help people already putting some of the learnings in practice. So how to identify your child's strength, how do you support them to apply it in different ways, to kind of scaffold that strength development. I think down the line we're also thinking a lot of our current work is around identifying young people's strength and how different people might support them to apply their strength. But at the same time, I think, we're thinking about supporting parents and carers to really think about, what might be their own personal strength actually that they might be able to tap into, whether that's for parenting or when they're supporting their young person. Are there similarities or differences in the strength that you might bring to the table? And also develop that package around, what can we do to support parents and carers to tap into themselves and their own strength when supporting their young person as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great, and we look forward to the future and all these opportunities, and to hear about the progress we make. I think you both told me already how rewarding, or what are the rewarding aspects of working on these projects. So I'm going to skip to the next question, which is, how has the research influenced your own perspectives or approaches towards working with autistic individuals, or young people in this case?
I think, I don't know, in my clinical work as an assistant psychologist, I sort of always viewed myself as working in a strength-based way. But I think sort of being involved in this research, it's made me actually think I've actually got a long way to go. I think just being able to really embrace that and just learning more about sort of the different types of strengths. It's not just soft skills, because that's sort of how I I was quite naive in that fact, and just sort of thinking it was just skill based, but it's in actual fact character strengths. Everybody has character strengths, and I think that's just been really nice to explore, I think. But definitely I think I've got a long way to go, I think, to really embrace it.
But that's the beauty of it, as you go along the process, it's all a learning journey.
Yeah, I think very similarly, and it's allowed me to realise just how many internal resources that young people might have that you can tap into. I think, whereas before, like Emma was saying, we might be really focused on particular skills or particular interests and passions that young people might have, and leverage that in clinical work that we do. But I guess now is really, character strength really allows you to see that person for who they are. Kind of, you get that more human connection component beyond just what can they or can't they do in day-to-day life. So I think it's really nice, because when we talk about working in a really person-centered way, what we want to do is really see that person for who they are and being able to connect with their own values. So it's been really refreshing to have a different way of looking at that, and to looking at lots of different values and support them to put those values into action as well.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
Yeah, that's great. So, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I would like you to tell me now, for those who are interested in learning more or getting involved, where can they find more information about your project?
That's a really great question. So you can always follow us on LinkedIn or social media platforms. We are always kind of putting out flyers. We also have been, through Andrea, connected with Oxford creators. So if you're interested, I'm sure there will be links and pages that we can share with Andrea and Oxford creators. And make sure to follow the podcast and Oxford creators, and also check out our social media pages.
Great, thank you. Anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
I don't think so. I think other than it's been a really nice chat and discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add, it's been such an incredible journey, like the families and the parents and the young people that we've met, and also teachers and clinicians too. It's been a really, really amazing journey. When I started this project about 7 months ago, it was just me sat in my office reading lots of papers thinking, is this actually going to take off? And now, I'm just so grateful for all the wonderful support we've received from our families, and that's really given us kind of the drive and the meaning behind our work as well. So thank you.
Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think we are the ones, or at least I have to especially thank you, because it's great to see. I think when we think about researchers, it's these, I don't know, maybe too serious people who are very focused on academia, but that's not the case, because you are two lovely people, and it's really good to see you engaging with the community and being a part of it. So thank you very much once again for your projects, and also for being my guests at the Neurodiverse Voices podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's been great.
And that was Dr. Jiedi Lei and Emma Jewitt, researchers at the University of Oxford. I have said this a million times, but I don't get tired of repeating myself. Having researchers like Jiedi and Emma, who are shaping our understanding of autism through a positive lens, means the world to me. And remember, they are not only researchers, they also shared their own very relevant lived experience that motivates them to support autistic young people and their parents. I'm very excited to find out more and to do my own interview to find out my character strengths as a parent in October. Keep an eye out on social media if you are interested in participating, or message if you'd like to find out more and how to get involved. I hope the return to school has gone well, and to those who did not return to school for several reasons, I am sending hugs, love, and positive vibes. wishing for the system to be fixed rather sooner than later. I leave you with the usual positive message of hope. Recognizing neurodiversity in academic research enriches our understanding of autism, turning differences into strengths and paving the way for inclusive innovation. I hope to have you on that side in a couple of weeks for the guest episode with Nick Citrick, founder and CEO of Autism Champions. The episode will be out on the 5th of October and you cannot miss it. And remember, I believe in the good things coming and you should too. Bye!